Chapter 2 Mystics, the Numerologists, and the Philosophers. Humans have always been driven by a desire to understand the cosmos. The efforts to get to the bottom of what does it all mean. Find those needed for measurable improvement in the economic situation or the quality of life. This does not mean that everybody has always actively engaged in the search for some natural or metaphysic order. Individuals struggling to make ends meet can rarely afford the luxury of contemplating the meaning of life. The gallery of those who hunted for patterns underlying the universe's perceived complexity, a few stood head, a few stood head and shoulders above the rest. To many, the name of the French mathematician, scientist, and philosopher René Descartes, 1596 until 1650, is synonymous with the birth of the modern age in the philosophy of science. Descartes was one of the principal architects of the shift from the description of the natural world in terms of properties directly perceived by our senses to explanations expressed through mathematically well-defined quantities is their largely characterized feelings, smells, colors, and sensations. Descartes wanted the scientific explanations to probe to the very fundamental mechanical and to use the language of mathematics. I recognize no matter incorporeal I recognize no matter incorporeal things apart from that which the geometers call quantity and take as the object of their demonstrations. And since all natural phenomena can be explained this way, I do not think that any other principles are either admissible or desirable in physics. Interestingly, Descartes excluded from his grand scientific exposition the realms of thought and mind which he regarded as independent of the mathematically explicable world of matter. While there is no doubt that Descartes was one of the most influential thinkers of the past 4 centuries, and as I return to him in chapter 4, he was not the first to have exalted mathematics to a certain position. Believe it or not, sweeping ideas of a cosmos permitted and governed by mathematics, ideas that in some sense went even broader than those of Descartes, have first been expressed, albeit with a strong mystical flavor, more than 2 millennia earlier. The person to whom legend ascribes the perception that the human soul is at music when engaged in pure mathematics was the enigmatic Pythagoras. Pythagoras. Pythagoras circa 572 until 497 BC, by having the first person who was both an influential natural philosopher and a charismatic spiritual philosopher, a scientist and a religious thinker. In fact, he is credited with introducing the world's philosophy, meaning love of wisdom and mathematics, the learned disciplines. Even though none of Pythagoras' own writings have survived, if these writings ever existed, since much was communicated orally, we do have three detailed, if one particularly reliable, biographies of Pythagoras from the 3rd century. A fourth, anonymous one was preserved in the writings of Byzantine patriarch and philosopher Photius circa AD 820 until 91. The main problem with attempting to assess Pythagoras' personal contributions lies in the fact that his followers and disciples, the Pythagoreans, invariably attribute all the ideas to him. Consequently, even Aristotle 384 until 322 BC finds it difficult to identify which portions of the Pythagorean philosophy can certainly be ascribed to Pythagoras himself, and he generally refers to the Pythagoreans or the so-called Pythagoreans. Nevertheless, given Pythagoras' fame in later tradition, it is generally assumed that he was the originator of at least some of the Pythagorean theories to which Plato and even Copernicus indebted. There is little doubt that Pythagoras was born in the early 6th century BC on the island of Samos, just off the coast of modern-day Turkey. He may have traveled extensively early in life, especially to Egypt and perhaps Babylon, when he would have received at least part of his mathematical education. Eventually, he emigrated to a small Greek colony in Croton, near the southern tip of Italy, where an enthusiastic group of students and followers quickly gathered around him. The Greek historian Herodotus circa 485 and 425 BC referred to Pythagoras as the most able philosopher among the Greeks, and the pre-Socratic philosopher and poet Empedocles circa 192 and 132 BC aided in admiration. But there was among them a man of prodigious knowledge, acquired a profound wealth of understanding, and was the greatest master of skilled arts of every kind. For whenever he will with all his heart, he could, with each discern each and every truth in his hand, nay, 20 men's lives. Still, not all were equally impressed. In comments that appear to stem from some personal rivalry, the philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus, circa 535 and 175 BC, acknowledges Pythagoras' broad knowledge, but he is also quick to add disparagingly, much learning does not teach wisdom, otherwise it would have taught Hesiod, a great poet who lived around 700 BC, and Pythagoras. Pythagoras and the early Pythagoreans were neither mathematicians nor scientists in the strict sense of these terms. Rather, a metaphysical philosophy of the meaning of numbers lay at the heart of the doctrines. To the Pythagoreans, numbers were both living entities and universal principles, permitting everything from the heavens to humanities. In other words, numbers had two distinct complementary aspects. On one hand, they had a tangible physical extent. On the other, they were abstract prescriptions on which everything was founded. For instance, the moment the number 1 was understood what as the generator of all other numbers, as an entity as real as water, air, and fire that participate in the structure of the physical world, and as an idea, the metaphysical unity of the source of all creation. The English historian of philosophy Thomas Stanley, 1625 until 78, described beautifully, if in 17th century English, the two meanings that the Pythagoreans associated with numbers. Number is of two kinds, the intellectual or immaterial, and the sciential. The intellectual is the internal substance of number, which Pythagoras in his discourse concerning the gods asserted to be the principal, most providential of all heaven and earth, and the nature that is betwixt them. This is that which is termed the principal, fountain, and root of all things. Sciential number is that which Pythagoras defines as the extension and production into act of the seminal reasons which are in the monad or a shape of monads. So numbers were not simply tools to denote quantities or amounts. Rather, numbers had to be discovered, and they were the formative agents that are active in nature. Everything in the universe, from material objects such as the earth to abstract concepts such as justice, was numbered to and through. The fact that someone would find numbers fascinating is perhaps not surprising in itself. After all, even the ordinary numbers encountered in everyday life have interesting properties that the number of days in a year 365. You can easily check that 365 is equal to the sums of three consecutive squares. 365 equal 10 square plus 11 square plus 2 plus 12 square. But this is not all. It is also equal to the sum of the next two squares. 365 equals to 1 equals 3 365 equals 1300 plus 1400, 13 square plus 14 square, or examine the number of days in the lunar month 28. This number is the sum of all its divisors, the number that divided with no remainder. 28 equals 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 7 plus 14. Numbers with this special property are called perfect numbers. The first perfect number are 6, 28, 496, 8218. Note also that 28 is the sum of the cubes of the first two odd numbers. 28 equals 1 cube plus 3 cube. Even a number as widely used in our decimal system as 100 has its own peculiarities. 100 equals 1 cube plus 2 cube plus 3 cube plus 4 cube. Okay, so number can be intriguing. Still, one may wonder what was the origin of the Pythagorean doctrine of numbers. How did the idea arise that not only do all things possess number, but that all things are numbers? Saint Pythagoras either wrote nothing down or his writings have been destroyed. It is not easy to answer the question. The surviving impression of Pythagoras' reasoning is based on a small number of pre-Platonic fragments and on much later, less reliable discussions, most by Platonic and Aristotelian philosophers. The picture that emerges from assembling the different clues suggests that the explanation of this obsession with numbers may be found in the preoccupation of the Pythagoreans with two apparently unrelated activities: experiments in music and observations of the heavens. To understand how those mysterious connections among numbers, the heavens, and music materialize, we have to start from the interesting observation that the Pythagoreans have a way of figuring numbers by means of pebbles or dots. For instance, they arrange the natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 as a collection of pebbles to form triangles as in figure 1. In particular, the triangle constructed out of the first four integers, arranged in a triangle of 10 pebbles, was called tetractys, meaning catenary or fourness, and was taken by the Pythagoreans to symbolize perfection and the elements to comprise it. This fact was documented in the story about Pythagoras by a Greek satirical author Lucian, circa AD 120 until 80. Pythagoras asks someone to count. As the man counts 1, 2, 3, 4, Pythagoras interrupts him. Do you see what you take for 4 is then a perfect triangle? And our oath, the Neoplatonic philosopher Iamblichus circa AD 250 and 325 tells us that the oath of the Pythagoreans was indeed: I swear by the discovery of the Tetractys, which is the spring of all wisdom, the perennial root of nature's fount. Why was the Tetractys so referred? Because to the eyes of the 6th century BC Pythagoreans, it seemed to outline the entire nature of the universe. In geometry, the springboard to the Greeks' epochal revolution in thought, the number 1 represented a point, 2 represented a line, 3 represented a surface, and 4 represented a three-dimensional tetrahedral solid. The Tetractys, therefore, appear to encompass all the perceived dimensions of space, but that was only the beginning. The Tatarkis made an unexpected appearance even in the scientific approach to music. Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans are generally credited with the discovery that dividing a string by simple consecutive integers produces harmonious and consonant intervals, a fact figuring in any performance by a string quartet. When two similar strings are plucked simultaneously, the resulting sound is pleasing when the lengths of the strings are in simple proportions. For instance, strings of equal length one the string of equal length produce an unison. A ratio of 1 2 produces the octave. 1 2 3 gives the perfect fifth. 3 4 the perfect fourth. In addition to its all embarrassing spatial attributes, therefore the Tatakis could also be seen as representing the mathematical ratios that underlie the harmony of the musical scale. This apparently magical union of space and music generated for the Pythagoreans a powerful symbol and gave them a feeling of harmonia, fitting together of the cosmos, the beautiful order of things. And when do the and where do the heavens fit into all of this? Pythagoreans and the Pythagoreans, Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans played a role in the history of astronomy that, while uncritical, was not negligible either. They are they, they were among they were among the first to maintain that the earth was spherical in form, probably because of the perceived mathematico-aesthetic superiority of the sphere. They were also probably the first to state that the planets, the sun, have an independent motion of their own from west to east, in a direction opposite to the daily apparent rotation of the sphere of the fixed stars. These enthusiastic observers of the midnight sky could not have missed the most obvious properties of the stellar constellations, shape and number. Each constellation is recognized by the number of stars that compose it and by the geometrical figure that these stars form. But these two characters were precisely the essential ingredients of Pythagorean doctrine of numbers, as exemplified by the Tetrachis. The Pythagoreans were so enraptured by the dependency of geometrical figures, stellar constellations, and musical harmonies on numbers that numbers became both the building blocks from which the universe was constructed and the principles behind its existence. No wonder then that no wonder then that Pythagoras' maxim was stated emphatically as all things accord in number. We can find a testament how to seriously the Pythagoreans took this maxim in two of Aristotle's remarks. In one place, in his collected treatise Metaphysics, he says the so-called Pythagoreans applied themselves to mathematics and were the first to develop this science, and through studying it, they came to believe that its principles are the principles of everything. In another passage, Aristotle vividly describes the veneration of numbers and the special role of Tetakis. Eurytus, a pupil of the Pythagorean Philolaus, settled what is the number of what object, e.g., this is the number of men that have a house, and imitated the shapes of living things by pebbles after the manner of those who bring numbers into the form of triangle or square. The last sentence, the form of triangle or square, alludes both to the Tetrarchy and to yet another fascinating Pythagorean constellation, Znomon. The word Znomon, a marker, originates from the name of Babylonian astronomical time measurement device similar to sundial. This apparatus was apparently introduced into Greece by Pythagoras' teacher, the natural philosopher Anaximander circa 611 and 547 BC. There can be no doubt that The pupil was influenced by his tutor's ideas in geometry and their application to cosmology, the study of the universe as a whole. Later, the term Drummond was used for an instrument for drawing right angles similar to a complex square for the right angle figure that, when added to a square, make up a larger square as in figure 2. Note that if you add, say, to a square to a 3 times 3 square 7 pebbles in a shape that forms a right angle Drummond, you obtain a square composed of 16 4 times 4 pebbles. This is a figurative representation of the following property. In the sentence of odd integers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, the sum of any number of successive members starting from 1 always forms a square member. For instance, 1, 1 square, 1, 3, 4, 2 square, 1, 3, 5, 9, 3 square, 1, 3, 5, 7, 16, 4 square, 1, 3, 5, 7, 19, 25, 5 square, and so on. The Pythagorean. The Pythagoreans remark. The Pythagoreans regarded this intimate relation between the genome and the square that it embraces as a symbol of knowledge in general, where the knowing is hugging the known. Numbers were therefore not limited to a description of the physical world, but were supposed to be at the root of mental emotional processes as well. The square numbers associated with the gnomons may have also been precursors to the famous Pythagorean theorem. This celebrated mathematical statement holds that for any right triangle figure 3, a square drawn on the hypotenuse is equal in area to the sum of the squares drawn on the sides. The discovery of the theorem was documented humorously in the famous Frank and Ants cartoon figure 4. As the gnomon in figure 2 shows, adding a square gnomon number 9 3 square to a 4 times 4 square makes a new 5 times 5 square 3 square plus 4 square equals 5 square. The number 345 can therefore represent the length of the sides of a right triangle. Integer numbers that have this property e.g. 5, 12, 13 since 5 square plus 2 plus 12 square equals 13 square are called Pythagorean triples. Few mathematical theorems enjoy the same name recognition as Pythagoras. In 1971, when the Republic of Nicaragua selected the 10 mathematical equations that changed the face of the earth as a theme for a set of stamps, the Pythagorean theorem appeared on the second stamp, figure 5. The first stamp depicted 1 plus 2 equals 2. 1 plus 1 equals 2. When Pythagoras truly the first person to have formulated the well-known theorem attribute was Pythagoras truly the first person to have formulated the well-known theorem attributed to him? Some of the early Greek historians certainly thought so. In a commentary on the Elements, the massive treatise on geometry and theory of numbers, written by Euclid circa 325 until 265 AD, the Greek philosopher Proclus circa AD 411 until 85 wrote, "If we listen to those who wish to recount ancient theory, we may find some who refer this theorem to Pythagoras and say that he sacrificed an ox in honor of the discovery. However, Pythagorean triples can already be found in the Babylonian cuneiform tablet known as Plimpton 322, which dates back roughly to the time of the dynasty of Hammurabi, circa 1900 until 1600 BC. Furthermore, geometrical constructions based on the Pythagorean theorem were found in India in relation to the building of altars. These constructions were clearly known to the author of Satapa Brahmana, the commentary on ancient Indian scriptural texts, which was probably written at least a few hundred years before Pythagoras. But whether Pythagoras was the originator But whether Pythagoras was the originator of the theorem or not, there is no doubt that the recurring connections that were found to weave numbers, shapes, and the universe together took the Pythagoreans one step closer to a data metaphysic of order. Another idea that played a central role in the Pythagorean world was that of cosmic opposites. Since the pattern of opposites was the underlying principle of the early Ionian scientific tradition, it was only natural for the order-based Pythagorean to adopt it. In fact, Aristotle tells us that even a medical doctor named Alcmaeon, who lived in Croton at the same time the Pythagoras had his famous school there, subscribed to the notion that all things are balanced in pairs. The principal pair of opposites consisted of the limit, represented by the odd numbers, and the unlimited, represented by the even. The limit was the force that introduces order and harmony into the wide, unbounded, unlimited, both the complexities of the universe at large and the intricacies of human life, because cosmically were thought to consist of and be directed by a series of opposites that somehow fit together. This rather black and white vision of the world was summarized in the table of opposites that was preserved in Aristotle's Metaphysics. The basic philosophically expressed by the table of opposites was not confined to ancient Greece. The Chinese yin and yang, with the yin representing the negativity and darkness, and the yang the bright principle, depict the same picture. Sentiments that are not too different were carried over into Christianity through the concepts of heaven and hell, and even into American presidential statements such as, "You are either with us or you are with the terrorists." More generally, it has always been true that the meaning of life has been illuminated by death and of knowledge by comparing it to ignore. Not all the Pythagorean teachings had to do directly with numbers. The lifestyle of the tightly knit Pythagorean society was also based on vegetarianism, a strong belief in metempsychosis, the immortality and transmigration of souls, and somewhat mysterious ban on eating beans. Several explanations have been suggested for the bean eating prohibition. They range from the resemblance of beans to genitals to bean eating being compared to eating a living soul. The latter interpretation regarded the wind breaking that often follows the eating of beans as proof of an extinguished breath. The book Philosophy of Dummies summarized the Pythagorean doctrine this way: everything is made of numbers, and don't eat beans because they'll do a number on you. The oldest surviving story about Pythagoras is related to the belief in the reincarnation of the soul into other things. This almost poetic tale comes from the 6th century BC poet Xenophanes of Colophon. They say that once Pythagoras passed by as a dog was being beaten, and pitying it, spoke as follows: "Stop and beat it not, for the soul is that of a friend. I know it, for I heard it speak." Pythagoras' unmistakable fingerprints can be found not only in the teachings of the Greek philosophers that immediately succeeded him, but all the way into the curricula of the medieval universities. The 7 subjects taught in those universities were divided into trivium, which included dialectic, grammar, and rhetoric, and quadrivium, which included the favorite topics of the Pythagoreans: geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music. The celestial harmony of the spheres, The music supposedly performed by the planets in the orbits, which according to his disciples, only Pythagoras could hear, has inspired poets and scientists alike. The famous astronomer Johannes Kepler, 1527, 1571 until 1630, who discovered the laws of planetary motion, chose the title of Harmonice Mundi, Harmony of the World, for one of his most seminal works. In the Pythagorean spirit, he even developed little musical tunes for different planets, as did the composer Gustav Holst 3 centuries later. From the perspective of the Christians that are at the focus of recent book, once we strip the Pythagorean philosophy of its mystical clothing, the skeleton that remains is still a powerful statement about mathematics, its nature, and its relation to both the physical world and the human mind. Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans were the forefathers of the search for cosmic order. They can be regarded as the founders of pure mathematics, in that unlike their predecessors, the Babylonians and the Egyptians, they engaged in mathematics as an abstract field, divorced from all practical purposes. The question of whether the Pythagoreans also established mathematics as a tool for science is a trickier one. While the Pythagoreans certainly associated all phenomena with numbers, the numbers themselves, not the phenomena or their causes, became the focus of study. This was not a particularly fruitful direction for scientific research to take. Still, fundamental to the Pythagorean doctrine was the implicit belief in the existence of general natural laws. This belief, which has become the central pillar of modern science, may have had its roots in the concept of fate in Greek tragedy. As late as the Renaissance, this word fate in the reality of a body of laws that can explain all phenomena was still progressing far in advance of any concrete evidence, and only Galileo Descartes Newton Newton turned it into a proposition defendable on inductive grounds. Another major contribution attributed to the Pythagoreans was the sobering discovery that their numerical religion was, in fact, pitifully unworkable. The whole numbers 1, 2, 3 are insufficient even for the construction of mathematics, let alone for description of the universe. Examine the square in the figure 6, in which the length of the side is 1 unit, and where we denote the length of the diagonal by d. We can easily find the length of the diagonal using the Pythagorean theorem in any of the two rectangles into which the square is divided. According to the theorem, the square of the diagonal, the hypotenuse, is equal to the sum of the squares of two shorter sides. This square equals 1 square plus square, or d square equals 2. Once you know the square of a positive number, you will find the number itself by taking the square root. E.g., if x squared equals 9, then the positive x square root of 9 equals 3. Then the square equals 2 implies d equals square root of 2 units. So the ratio of the length of the diagonal to the length of the square side is the number square root of 2. Here, however, came the real shock, a discovery that demolished the meticulously constructed Pythagorean discrete number philosophy. One of the Pythagoreans, possibly Hippasus of Metapontum, who lived in the first half of the 5th century BC, managed to prove that the square root of 2 cannot be expressed as a ratio of any two whole numbers. In other words, even though we have an infinity of whole numbers to choose from, the search for two of them that give a ratio of square root of 2 is doomed. from the start. Numbers that can be expressed as a ratio of two whole numbers, e.g. 3 over 17, 2 over 5, 1 over 10, 9 over 6 over 1, are called rational numbers. The Pythagoreans proved that square root of 2 is not a rational number. In fact, soon after the original discovery, it was released that neither are square root of 3, square root of 17, or the square root of any number that is not a perfect square, such as 16 or 25. The consequences were dramatic. The Pythagoreans showed that to the infinity of rational numbers, we are forced to add an infinity of new kinds of numbers, ones that today we call irrational numbers. The importance of this discovery for the subsequent development of mathematical analysis cannot be overemphasized. Among other things, it led to the recognition of the existence of countable or uncountable infinities in the 19th century. The Pythagoreans, however, were so overwhelmed by the philosophical crisis that the philosopher Iamblichus reports that the man who discovered irrational numbers and disclosed their nature to those unworthy to say in the theory was so hated that not only was he banned from the Pythagoreans' common association and way of life, but even his tomb was built as if the former congregate was departed from life among mankind. Pythagoras, even more important than the discovery of irrational numbers, was the pioneering Pythagorean insistence on mathematical proof of a pseudo based entirely on logical reasoning, by which starting from some postulates, the validity of any mathematical proposition could be unambiguously established. Prior to the Greeks, even mathematicians did not expect anyone to be interested in the least in the mental struggles that had led them to a particular discovery. If a mathematician received work in practice, save for dividing up parcels of land, that was proof enough. The Greeks, on the other hand, wanted to explain why it worked. While the notion of proof may have first been introduced by the philosopher Thales of Miletus circa 625 until 547 BC, the Pythagoreans were ones who turned this practice into an impeccable tool for ascertaining mathematical truths. The significance of this breakthrough in logic was enormous. Proofs stemming from postulates immediately put mathematics on a much firmer foundation than that of any other discipline discussed by the philosophers of the time. Once a rigorous proof, based on steps in reasoning that left no loopholes, had been presented, the validity of the associated mathematical statement was essentially unassailable. Even Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of the world's most famous detective, recognized the special status of mathematical proof. In a study in Scarlet, Sherlock Holmes declares that his conclusions are as infallible as so many proportions of a grid. On the question of whether mathematics was discovered or invented, Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans had no doubt mathematics was real, immutable, omnipresent, and more sublime than anything that could conceivably emerge from the feeble human mind. The Pythagoreans literally embedded the universe into mathematics. In fact, to the Pythagoreans, God was not a mathematician. Mathematics was God. The importance of the Pythagorean philosophy lies not only in its actual intrinsic value, but setting the stage, and to some extent the agenda for the next generation of philosophers. Plato in particular, the Pythagoreans established a commanding position in Western thought into Plato's cave. The famous British mathematician and philosopher Alfred North Whitehead 1861 until 1947, remarked once that the saved that remarked once that the savage generation that can be made about the history of Western philosophy is that it is all a series of footnotes to Plato. Indeed, Plato, circa 428 until 347 BC, was the first to have brought together topics ranging from mathematics, science, and language to religion, ethics, and art, and to have treated them in a unified manner that essentially defined philosophy as a discipline. To Plato, philosophy was not some abstract subject divorced from everyday activities, but rather the safe guide to how humans should live their lives, recognize truths, and conduct their politics. In particular, he maintained that philosophy can gain us access to a realm of truths that lies far beyond what we can either perceive directly with our senses or even deduce by simple common sense. Who was this relentless seeker of pure knowledge, absolute good, and eternal truths? Plato, the son of Aristotle and Pericteon, was born in Athens or Aegina. Figure 7 shows a Roman hymn of Plato that was most likely copied from an older 4th century BC original. His family had a long line of distinction on both sides, including such figures as Solon, the celebrated lawmaker, and Cordus, the king of Athens. Plato's uncle Charmides and his mother's cousin Critias were orphans of the verbose philosopher Socrates, circa 470 until 399 BC, a relation that in many ways defined the formative influence to which the young Plato's mind was exposed. Originally, Plato intended to enter into politics, but a series of violent actions by the political faction that courted him at the time convinced him otherwise. Later in life, this initial repulsion by politics may have encouraged Plato to outline what is regarded as the essential education for future guardians of the state. In one case, he even attempted unsuccessfully to tutor the ruler of Syracuse, Dionysius II. Following the execution of Socrates in 399 BC, Plato embarked on extensive travel that he did only when he founded his renowned school of philosophy and science, the Academy, around 387 BC. Plato was the director or scholar of the Academy until his death, and his nephew Speusippus succeeded him in that position. Un- unlike academic institutions today, unlike academic institutions today, the Academy was a great informal gathering of intellectuals who, under Plato's guidance, pursued a wide variety of interests. There were no tuition fees. There were no tuition fees, no prescribed curricula, and not even real faculty members. Still, there was apparently one rather unusual entrance requirement. According to an oration by the 4th century AD Emperor Julian, there posted a burdensome inscription hung over the door to Plato's Academy. While the text while the text of the inscription does appear in the oration, it can be found in another 4th century margin note. The inscription read, "Let no one destitute of geometry enter." Since no fewer than an 8th century separate the establishment of the academy and the first exhibition of the inscription, we can absolutely certain that such an inscription indeed existed. There is no doubt, however, that, that the sentiment expressed by this demanding requirement reflected Plato's personal opinion. In one of his famous dialogues, Gorgias, Plato writes, "Geometric equality is of great importance among gods and men." The students in the academy were generally self-supporting, and some of them, the great Aristotle, the great, the great Aristotle for one, stayed there for as long as 20 years. Plato considered this long-term contact of creative minds to be the best vehicle for the production of new ideas in topics ranging from abstract metaphysics and mathematics to ethics and politics. The purity and almost divine attributes of Plato's disciplines were captured beautifully in a painting entitled The School of Plato by the Belgian symbol painter Jean de, Davy, Jean Deville, 1867 until 1953. To emphasize the spiritual qualities of the students, Deville painted them in the nude, and they appeared to be androgynous because that was supposed to be the state of primordial humans. I was disappointed to discover that the archaeologists were never able to find the remains of Plato's academy. On a trip to Greece in the summer of 2007, I looked for the next best thing. Plato mentions the Stoa of Zeus, a covered walkway built in the 5th century BC, as a favorite place to talk to friends. I found the ruins of the Stoa in the northwest part of the ancient Agora in Athens, which was the civic center in Plato's time, figure 8. I must say that even though the temperature reached 115 Fahrenheit that day, I felt something like shiver as I walk as I walk along the same path that must have been traversed hundreds, if not thousands, of times by the great man. The legendary inscription above the academy's door speaks loudly about Plato's attitude toward mathematics. In fact, most of the significant mathematical research of the 4th century BC was carried out by people associated in one way or another with the academy. Yet Plato himself was not a mathematician of great technical dexterity, and his direct contributions to mathematical knowledge were probably minimal. Rather, he was an enthusiastic spectator, a motivating source of challenge, an intelligent critic, and an inspiring guide. The first century philosopher and historian Philodemus paints a clear picture. At the time, great progress was seen in mathematics, with Plato serving as the general architect, setting out problems, and the mathematicians investigating them earnestly. To which the Neoplatonic philosopher and mathematician Proclus adds, Plato, great advanced mathematics in general and geometry in particular. Plato, great advanced mathematics in general and geometry in particular. Because of his zeal for these studies, it is well known that his writings are thickly sprinkled with mathematical terms and that he everywhere tries to arouse admiration for mathematics among students of philosophy. In other words, Plato, whose mathematical knowledge was wholly up to date, could converse with the mathematicians as an equal and as a problem presenter, even though his personal mathematical achievements were not significant. Another striking demonstration of Plato's appreciation of mathematics comes in what is perhaps his most accomplished book, The Republic, a mind-blowing fusion of aesthetics, ethics, metaphysics, and politics. There, in Book 7, Plato, though the central figure of Socrates, outlined an ambitious plan of education designed to create utopian state rules. This rigorous this rigorous is if idealist curriculum envisage an early training in childhood imparted through play, travel, and gymnastics. After the selection of those who showed promise, the program continued with no fewer than 10 years of mathematics, 5 years of dialectic, and 15 years of practical experience, which included holding commands in time of war and other offices suitable to youth. Plato gave clear explanations as to why he thought that This was the necessary training for the would-be politicians. What we require is that those who take office should not be lovers of rule, otherwise there will be a contest with rival lovers. What others then will you compel to undertake the guardianship of the city? Then those who have most intelligence of the principles that are the means of good government and who possess distinctions of another kind and a life that is preferable to political life. Refreshing, isn't it? In fact, while such a demanding program was probably impractical even in Plato's time, George Washington agreed that an education in mathematics and philosophy was not a bad idea for the politicians to be. Science of figures, to a certain degree, is not only dispensably requisite in every walk of civilized life, but investigation of mathematical truths accustoms the mind to method and correctness in reasoning and is an worthy peculiarly worthy of rational being. In a clouded state of existence, where so many things appear precarious to the bewildered research, it is here that the rational faculties find foundation to rest upon. From the high ground of mathematical and philosophical demonstration, we are insensibly led to far nobler speculations and sublimer meditations. For the question of the nature of mathematics, even more important than Plato the mathematician or the math simulator, was Plato the philosopher of mathematics. Their history blazing ideas but put him not only above all the mathematicians and philosophers of his generation, but identified him as an influential figure for the following millennia. Plato's vision of what mathematics truly is makes strong reference to his famous allegory of the cave. There he emphasized the doubtful validity of the information provided through the human senses. What we perceive as the real world, Plato says, is more real than than shadows projected onto the walls of a cavern. Here is the remarkable passage from the Republic. Human beings, as though they were in an underground cave-like dwelling with an entrance, a long one, open to the eye across the whole width of the cave. They are in it from childhood with their legs and necks in bonds so that they are fixed, seeing only in front of them, unable because of the bond to turn their heads all the way round. The light is from a fire burning far above and behind them, between the fire and the prisoners. There's a God above, along which we see a wall, but built like the partitions puppet handles see in front of the human beings and over which they shadow the puppets. They also see along this wall human beings carrying all sorts of artifacts which project above the wall and statues of men and other animals wrought from stone, wood and every kind of material. Do you suppose such men would have seen anything of themselves and one another other than the shadows cast by the fire on the side of the cave facing them? According to Plato, we humans in general are not different from those prisoners in the cave who mistake the shadows for reality. Figure 9 shows an engraving by John Serendam from, from 1604 illustrating the allegory. In particular, Plato's thesis, mathematical truths refer not to circles, triangles, and squares that can be drawn on the piece of papyrus or remarked with a stick in the sand, but to abstract objections that dwell in an ideal world that is the home of two forms and perfections. This Platonic world of mathematical forms is distinct from the physical world, and it is in this first world that mathematical propositions such as the Pythagorean theorem hold true. The right triangle we might draw on paper is but an imperfect copy, an approximation of the two abstract triangles. Another fundamental issue that Plato examined in some detail concern the nature of mathematical proof as a process that is based on postulates and axioms. Axioms are basic assertions whose validity is assumed to be self-evident. For instance, the first axiom in Euclidean geometry is, between any 2 points a straight line may be drawn. In the Republic, Plato beautifully combines the concept of postulates with his notion of the world of mathematical terms. I think you know that those who occupy themselves with geometries and calculations and the like take for granted the odd and even numbers, figures, three kinds of angles, and other kinds coordinate to this in this subject, assuming these things as none. They take them as hypotenuses, and thenceforward they do not feel called upon to give an explanation with regard to them either to themselves or anyone else, but treat them as manifest to everyone, basing themselves on these hypotenuses. Based on his hypothesis, they proceed at once to go through the rest of the argument. They proceed at once to go through the rest of the argument till they arrive with general assent at the particular conclusion to which the inquiry was directed. Further, you know that they make use of visible figures and argue about them. By doing so, they are not thinking about these figures, but of the things which they represent. Thus, it is the absolute square and the and the absolute diameter which is the object of the argument, not the diameter which they draw, the object of the inquiry being to see the absolute counterparts which cannot be seen otherwise than the thought emphasized it. Those views form the basis for what has become known in philosophy in general and in discussions of the nature of mathematics in particular as Platonism. Platonism, in this broadest sense, exposes a belief in some abstract eternal and immutable realities that are entirely independent of the transient world perceived by our senses. According to Platonism, the real existence of mathematical objects is as much an objective fact as is the existence of the universe itself. Not only do natural numbers, cycles, and squares exist, but so do imaginary numbers, functions, fractals, non-Euclidean geometries, and infinite series, as well as a variety of theorems about these entities. In short, every mathematical concept or objectively true statement to be defined later, either formulated or imagined, and an infinity of concepts and statements not yet discovered are absolute entities or universals that can neither be created nor destroyed. They exist independently of our knowledge of them. Needless to say, these objects are not physical. They live in an autonomous world of timeless essences. Platonism views mathematicians as explorers of foreign lands. They can only discover mathematical truths, not invent them. In the same way that America was already there long before Columbus or Leif Erikson discovered it. Mathematical theorems existed in the Platonic world because the Babylonians ever initiated mathematical studies. To Plato, the only things that truly and wholly exist are those abstract forms and ideas of mathematics, since only in mathematics, he maintained, could we gain absolutely certain and objective knowledge. Consequently, in Plato's mind, mathematics becomes closely associated with the divine, and the dialogue Timaeus, the creator god uses mathematics to fashion the world, and in the Republic, knowledge of mathematics is taken to be a crucial step on the pathway to knowing the divine forms. Plato does not use mathematics for the formulation of some laws of nature that are testable by experiments. Rather, for him, the mathematical character of the world is simply as a consequence of the fact that God always geometricizes. Plato extended his ideas on true forms to other disciplines as well, in particular to astronomy. He argued that in true astronomy we must leave the heaven alone and attempt to account for the arrangements and the apparent motions of the visible stars. Instead, Plato regarded true astronomy as a science dealing with the laws of motion in some ideal mathematical world for which the observable heaven is a mere illustration, in the same way that geometrical figures drawn on papyrus only illustrate their true figures. Plato's suggestions for astronomical research are considered controversial even by some of the most devout Platonists. Defenders of his ideas argue that what Plato really means is that the true astronomy should concern itself with some ideal heaven that has nothing to do with the observable one, but that it should deal with the real motions of celestial bodies as opposed to the apparent motions as seen from Earth. Others point out, however, that too literal an adoption of Plato's dictum would have seriously impeded the development of observational astronomy as a science. Be interpretation of Plato's attitude toward astronomy as it may, Plato has become one of the leading dogmas when it comes to the foundations of mathematics. But does the Platonic world of mathematics really exist? And if it does, where exactly is it? And what are these objectively true statements that inhabit this world? Or are the mathematicians whether the Platonism simply expressing the same type of romantic belief that has been attributed to great Renaissance after Michelangelo? According to legend, Michelangelo believed that his magnificent sculptures already existed inside the blocks of marble and that his role was merely to uncover them. Modern-day Platonists, yes, they definitely exist, and their views will be as described in more detail in later chapters, insist that Platonic world of mathematical forms is real, and they offer what they regard as concrete examples of objectively true mathematical statements that reside in this world. Take the following easy to understand proposition. Every even integer greater than 2 can be written as the sum of two primes, numbers divisible only by 1 and themselves. This simple sounding statement is known as the Goldbach conjecture, since an equivalent conjecture appeared in a letter written by the Prussian amateur mathematician Christian Goldbach 1690 until 1764 on June 1742. You can easily verify the validity of the conjecture for the first few even numbers. 4 equals 2 plus 2, 6 equals 3 plus 3, 8 equals 3 plus 5, 10 equals 3 plus 7 or 5 plus 5, 12 equals 5 plus 7, 14 equals 3 plus 11 or 7 plus 7, 16 equals 5 plus 11 or 3 plus 13, and so on. The statement is so simple that the British mathematician G.H. Hardy declared that any fool could have guessed it. In fact, the great French mathematician and philosopher René Descartes had anticipated this conjecture before Goldbach. Proving the conjecture, however, turned out to be quite a different matter. In 1966, the Chinese mathematician Chen Jingrun made a significant step toward a proof. He managed to show that every sufficiently large even integer is the sum of two numbers, one of which is a prime and the other has at most two prime factors. By the end of 2005, the Portuguese researcher Thomas Oliveira e Silva had shown the conjecture to be true for number up to 3 times 10 to 17, 300,000 trillion. Yet in spite of enormous efforts by many talented mathematicians, a general proof remains elusive at the time of this writing. Even the additional temptation of a $1 million prize offered between March 20, 2000 and March 20, 2002 to have publicized a novel entitled Uncle Petros and Goldbach's conjecture did not produce the desired result. Here, however, comes the crux of the meaning of objective truth in mathematics. Suppose that the rigorous proof will actually be formulated in 2016. Would we then be able to say that the statement was already true when Descartes first thought about it? Most people would agree that this equation is silly. Clearly, if the proposition is proven to be true, then it has always been true, even before we knew it to be true. Or let's look at another innocent-looking simple noun, as Catalan's conjecture. The numbers 8 and 9 are consecutive whole numbers, and each of them is equal to a per power, that is 8 equals 2 to 3, 9 equals 3 to 2. In 1844, the Belgian mathematician Eugene Charles Catalan, 1814 until 94, conjectured that among all the possible numbers of whole numbers, the only pair of consecutive numbers, excluding 0 and 1, is 8 and 9. In other words, you can spend your life written down all the pure powers that exist. Other than 8, 9, and 9, you will find no other numbers that differ by only 1. In 1342, the Jewish French philosopher and mathematician Levi ben Gerson, 1288 until 1344, actually proved a small part of the conjecture that 8 and 9 are the only powers of 2 and 3 differing by 1. A major step forward was taken by the mathematician Robert Tiedemann in 1976. Still, the proof of the general form of Catalan's conjecture stymied the best mathematical minds for more than 150 years. Finally, on April 18, 2002, the Romanian mathematician Preda Mihailescu presented a complete proof of the conjecture. His proof was published in 2004 and is now fully accepted. Again, you ask, when did Catalan's conjecture become true? In 1342, in 1844, in 1976, in 2002, in 2004. Isn't it obvious that the statement was always true, only that we didn't know it to be true? These are the types of truths Platonists who would refer to as objective truths. Some mathematicians, philosophers, cognitive scientists, and other consumers of mathematics, e.g., computer scientists, regard the Platonic world as a figment of the imagination of two dreamy minds. I shall describe this perspective and other dogmas in detail later in the book. In fact, in 1940, the famous historian of mathematics Eric Templeton, 1883 until 1960, made the following prediction. According to the prophets, the last adherent of the Platonic ideal in mathematics will have joined the dinosaur by the year 2000. Divested of its mythical raiment of eternalism, mathematics will then be recognized for what it has always been: a humanly constructed language devised by human beings for definite ends prescribed by themselves. The last temple of an absolute truth will have vanished with the nothing it enshrined. Bell's prophecy proved to be wrong. Why dogmas that are diametrically opposed but in different directions to Platonic have emerged. Those have not fully won the minds and hearts of all mathematicians and philosophers who remain today as divided as ever. Suppose, however, that Platonism had won the day and we had all become wholehearted Platonists. Does Platonism actually explain the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in describing our world? Not really. Why should physical reality behave according to laws that reside in abstract Platonic world? This was, after all, one of Penrose's mysteries, and Penrose is a devout Platonist himself. So for the moment we have to accept the fact that even if we were to embrace Platonism, the puzzle of powers of mathematics would remain unsolved. In Wigner's words, it is difficult to avoid the impression that the miracle confronts us here comparable in its striking nature to the miracle that the human mind can string 1,000 arguments together without getting itself into contradictions. To fully appreciate the magnitude of this miracle, we have to delve into the lives and legacies of some of the miracle workers themselves, the mind, the minds behind the discoveries of a few of those incredibly precise mathematical laws of nature.